Pues este es su programa Dialogando en la Ciudad de las Ideas. Hoy tendremos una mente espectacular y por supuesto provocadora. El propósito es cuestionarnos, preguntarnos, debatir con nosotros mismos y partir de una referencia. No te creas todo lo que piensas. Estoy abierto al diálogo, al otro, no solamente a consentir con el otro, sino a concientizar con lo que el otro me dice. Ese es el propósito de un diálogo. No ningunear, no anular, no obsesionarnos con lo que pensamos. A ver si después de este programa salimos y entramos siendo distintos. Acompáñenos.
Malcolm Gladwell, periodista de la revista The New Yorker e investigador cultural de gran repercusión. Gladwell desmenuza las razones que explican por qué algunas personas triunfan y otras no. En una cultura que celebra el talento, Gladwell se atreve a sostener que hay más esfuerzo que genio en los que llegan a ser exitosos. Actualmente es más conocido por ser el autor de los libros La clave del éxito, Inteligencia intuitiva, ¿por qué sabemos la verdad en 2 segundos? Y Fuera de serie, ¿por qué unas personas tienen éxito y otras no?
Bienvenidos a un programa más de la Ciudad de las Ideas para pensar sobre pensar, y realmente tenemos el honor de estar aquí con uno de los escritores más talentosos y reconocidos del mundo contemporáneo. ¿Quién no conoce el gran libro de Blink, The Typing Point? Y ahorita viene un gran trabajo también que se llama Outlier, que en español es un punto aberrante, lo que no está dentro del promedio, lo que realmente es el verdadero Black Swan, que puede cambiar las cosas. Y para ustedes, gran escritor del New Yorker, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm, it's truly an honor to be with you here at Maine. Today you talk about Outlier, about your next book. Could you please explain us a little bit about it, and then we can make you some questions?
Yes, it's a book about where successful people come from. So what kind of backgrounds, environments, contexts produce people who do extraordinary things?
Well, there have been many hypotheses about that topic. Some of them, of course, have been very provocative, like Charles Murray, and one is saying that there are a lot of things to do with genetics and to do with culture. But what's your point here?
I'm not interested in those things at all. I think we've paid far too much attention to the role of genetics, and I'm not interested in the things that come from inside a person. I'm interested in the world around them. To use a kind of an analogy, I'm looking at the tallest trees in the forest, but I'm not interested in the seed. I'm interested in the sunlight and the soil and the natural predators, and whether another tree, dwarfs it and cuts off the sunlight, and that's what I want to know about, the ecology of success.
And so far in what you have been doing your research, what have you found? Which are like the characteristics that actually make successful people success?
Well, for example, I'm very interested in I have a whole section, for example, about why it matters when you were born, right? So, for example, an incredible number of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley were born within 6 months of each other. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Bill Joy. Bill Joy is the guy who wrote the software for the internet. Are all born in 1955, as are a whole list of other very prominent people in Silicon Valley. 20% of the richest people in human history were born within 9 years of each other in the 1830s. It's a small thing, but it leads me to a discussion about why your generation matters, the assumptions you were brought up with, the way the world looked like when you were 20 years old and you looked out over the first time and wondered, what am I going to do with my life? These things make an enormous difference. And I go from there to talk about family and talk about the culture, why it matters what culture we belong to. And so it is very much about the ecology of what people are doing.
Well, as you know, in Latin America, as around the world, you are a very recognized personality. Your books have influenced a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people like myself, which I'm very grateful for you. But if I ask your case in particular, what makes you so successful? I mean, you have like ideas that are outliers and that make us think about thinking. But could you explain your case also in these parameters?
Oh, I'm not sure I can.
Or you're an outlier of your own?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm good at explaining that. I mean, I think I've been very lucky, and it helps that I'm I'm an outsider myself. I live in America, but I was raised in Canada and born in England, and it's always easier for an outsider to see a culture, in a new way, and to be able to sort of diagnose what's going on in the culture. I think that's a real advantage of my position as an immigrant.
In one of your conferences mentioned that the case of the Chinese Americans in the United States, how successful they have been. And now you're telling me also and explaining me how you coming from other countries, you have made it in a way. There have been a lot of economic theories explaining that migrants, also Mexicans coming to the States, they have to put much more effort to be successful because the pay of what they have done to come here is so high that they really have to do the best of themselves.
Yeah.
But when you were talking to talk much more about persistence than about talent and much more about a culture of really working hard.
Yeah.
Do you think that's really the key, or there is like an insight of surviving?
I speak a lot about that so much of success properly understood is the result of effort and persistence. The cultures that value those two things succeed, disproportionately. And Asian cultures are a very good example of cultures where that place an extraordinary premium on hard work. And now doesn't tell the whole story. You need to be in a situation where your hard work pays off. And I talk in the book about the experience of Jewish immigrants to America, and it's very useful to contrast that with the experience of Mexican immigrants to America. They came at roughly the same time to America, the beginning of the 20th century. They both came penniless, without any education. They both came in many ways fleeing hardship at home. They both came with cultures that really stressed hard work. The difference was that the Jewish immigrants came to New York and worked in an industry, the garment industry, where that kind of hard work paid off. It gave people opportunities if they were able to succeed. Mexican migrants to California went to work in the fields, where hard work didn't pay off. It wasn't that you began to understand the business it just meant that your back was sore and and that has nothing to do with any inherent differences in Jews and Mexicans. It has to do with simple good luck on the Jewish side, context, and bad luck on the Mexican side. If Mexicans had immigrated to New York in that period and Jewish immigrants from Europe had immigrated to California, we would be talking about them in exactly the opposite way today. We'd be talking about the extraordinary success of Mexicans in American culture and why haven't the Jews got their act together.
As Mexican also, I can tell you what happens sometimes when Mexicans go to the United States. Even that they work very hard in Mexico, for their perspective, they are not successful in Mexico and they are successful in the States.
Yeah.
So it's also, well, another question that you talk about that I was like, you mentioned that you went to a very elite school in Canada and that most of the people that went with you, probably 100% of them, are very successful persons. My question is if the variables are correct. I mean, when a very elite school accept you, as well as your friends or colleagues, they already made like a study of who will be successful, and they already, I don't know if your school give you that chance, or if or if you went to that school because you already have the chance. I don't know if I explain myself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. That's why one of the reasons why that's why all of us have done so well is that we're measuring a group of people who were pre-selected.
Pre-selected.
We had all kinds of advantages going in. It tells us nothing. As I said in my talk today, American society does a really wonderful job of developing the human potential of the top 10%. And that's all my story says.
Okay.
But it does a very terrible job of the bottom 90%.
What made you do this new book, Outlier? What was going on?
I just thought I was reacting to a kind of strain in the culture where people who were very successful were walking around and saying that they deserved everything they got, that they deserved the big salaries and the fancy cars because they had worked hard and they had created their own success. And it was just my feeling that they didn't create their own success and that we need to have a much broader and more humble appreciation of where success comes from.
Of course, sounds strange because everybody talks about it, and in a way we have a feeling of what success is, but for you success means?
In this book I'm just talking about occupational success.
Occupational success.
Not happiness. There are many books on happiness. This is one of them.
Could you elaborate a little bit why it's so important ideas and how that make not only people successful, but that was my question before, in a way, to make countries richer and how important it is to bet on ideas?
Yeah, well, just because the nature of work has changed so much that today where the money is in the intellectual portion of a product, not the physical portion. A computer is just bits of plastic and metal that probably, if you melted them down, would be worth $2. But a computer sells for $1,000 because it has $998 worth of thinking in it. And so that's where, as the world economy gets more complicated and more interrelated and more competitive, the place where wealth is generated is going to be at the intellectual end. That's why these kinds of ideas matter, because they're where they're the engine of progress and growth.
Once you mentioned it, the runners of Kenya, that they have so good athletes. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have read Michael Shermer. He explains that before, the best basketball players were no Afro-Americans. Mm-hmm. They were Jews, white Jews, by the way. Yeah. And that there's nothing general. But Kenyans, what's your explanation that they are so well?
The Kenyans do a very good job of capitalizing on their potential in that area. Everyone who has the skill to be potential of being a great runner is found and given a chance to develop that skill. They have the statistic that I love was from Alberto Salazar, the great American marathoner, points out that there are 1 million kids between the age of 12 and 17 in Kenya who run between 10 and 12 miles a day. That is an astonishing figure. I mean, I used to be a runner myself, and I think there are maybe 5,000 American kids in that age group who run that much. If you have that many kids running that long, you're going to have lots and lots and lots of great distance runners. It's nothing, I don't think that the genetic explanation is necessary. It's a difference in the kind of investment that society is willing to make in that particular activity. And that is the lesson in all of this.
Because, well, we coming from Latin American countries, we have seen like Brazil, that they decided that all the kids will play soccer. Yeah. And now they have one of the greatest soccer teams in the world. Yeah. And for example, South Korea decided that they will study math.
Yeah.
And they have great mathematicians. If I understood correctly, it's much more the reason of being successful and having successful people in that area. I will try to say the word in English, is culturalizar. It's like culturalize that everybody's in the culture of going that, but whoever wants to do it can do it in that way if there is like a policy of state doing that.
Yeah, I think that's what the lesson of this is, that success is a choice.
Success is a choice.
A choice that a society makes. We choose what we would like to excel in. And these are all little evidences. Brazil chose soccer. Jamaica has chosen sprinting. India has chosen engineering. You know, I mean, some choices are better than others. You know, my country, Canada, has chosen hockey. You know, I wish we hadn't. I wish we'd chosen something more useful. But we, you know, we have to. Great achievement is not something that bubbles up, you know, magically from the ground. It's the result of everyday decisions that societies and communities make for themselves.
You have mentioned that there have been three obstacles to actually be success. One has to do with poverty, that we know. Another with stupidity, if I understood correctly. And the other one has to do with this, to be devoted to this kind of thing. Could you explain us a little bit what you mean by stupidity?
Well, that point I was making today was that sometimes people we frustrate the ability of talented people to reach their full potential through dumb rules, through institutions that are set up badly, through badly thought out practices. And I was making the example of Canada, where all the great hockey players are born within the first half of the year. And that's because of the eligibility dates for young hockey players are January 1st. And so kids who are born near the eligibility date are bigger and stronger at an earlier age and have a big